Going live. All right. Okay, so last class we did kind of a very fast overview of the visual systems. We're going to do exactly the same thing again, except we're going to start filling in details today. Okay, watch this out. Okay, so we're going to start filling in some details. And the details help you understand the big picture. I always get kind of criticized, but I always do things more than one time. Like if I'm painting, how come I have to it takes me a long time to paint? Yeah, and I suck at painting. So why do I have to paint like my wife's poor bathroom? I painted like 4 times and trying to get it all right. Because you start in the morning and the light looks good and you paint everything's good. Then in the afternoon you get in there and you realize all the spots that you missed when the light's in a different place. Yeah. So as my my illustrious family, and specifically my father-in-law, always says to me, details. Whatever. Okay. So I like to do things more than once so that I make sure that we get the details. Every time you learn something, what happens? You learn it faster. Every time you learn something, you learn it faster. So like for riding a bicycle, why is it easy to ride a bike if you've learned how to ride one? Because you already know how to ride one, when you get to the bicycle, you can apply all that previous learning to the next time that you, quote, learn how to ride a bicycle again. I taught Donna to ride a bicycle. I could teach you to ride a bicycle, no problem. We don't have a bicycle small enough in the house that you can ride right now, though, because Donna rode my son's bicycle, but my son's bigger than most of y'all now, so anyway. Okay, he rides my old bicycle. So I'm going to start at the back. Primary visual cortex. What do you actually see? What does a primary visual cortex actually see? If I take an electric stimulator and zap you back here, what will you perceive? You won't see light or dark if I zap you back here. If I hit the whole area with a brick, but you will see a very large white light. And you ever get hit in the back of the head and you can't see for a while? This is a really classic moment of Weinert mountain biking history. I went to go off a little bank by our house, and I went to go down the hill, and a tree branch got me right in the forehead. And it was like one of those cartoons where you stop in midair and the bike just keeps going, and I fell back. When I hit, my helmet shattered, which was fine because that's what helmets are designed to do, and that was good until I went back with my shattered helmet onto the ground and hit my head really hard, and I hit my head back here. I sat up, and the world was gray. And I'm trying to see, and I can't see. Crap. I had an occipital lobe concussion. Yay! What is it? So what was happening in my occipital lobe? Not light and dark. You don't see light and dark. You see light and dark in your eyeballs. What do you see back here? They're drawn right there. Lines! Yay! Okay, lines. You see lines. So why would I just see gray? All the lines blend together to form one giant gray wad. One giant gray field of vision, because all my lines were activated because of the concussion. All on. Yay! What if I turn them all off? What do you experience? Black, darkness. So please don't do this, because it's really bad for your eyeballs. the next time you're falling asleep, close your eyes and kind of mash on your eyeballs a little bit. What do you see? You see lights. As you press on the nerves and you move your eyeball around, again, is it good for your eyeball to do this? No, so it's not, don't just do this to experiment with. But what happens is you're actually physically manipulating the nerves and you're sending signals back to your brain. Some people see checkerboard patterns, some people see lines, some people see spots, all depending on how you're bashing the nerve. Ooh, please be careful. Okay, so now, but when you see these lines, in order for you to differentiate a shape, in order for you to differentiate what that shape is, what has to be put together? How many lines did I draw there? Two lines. What are the two lines that I drew? Vertical and horizontal. I'm activating two columns in my visual cortex with that square. Two columns. So I have one column here and one column here. So I'm going to draw this other one. I'm not going to use magic sparkles even though I really want to. Here's these lines. This is this column. Here's this column, which are these lines. Following this so far? I'm activating two columns in my occipital lobe. Two columns. Horizontal column and vertical column. Are these lines that continue up the entire screen or do they stop at a point? They stop. And so I'm going to go down to here where these are called hypercomplex cells. This is the layer at which I am seeing these lines. If the lines continued on into space forever, I would look at it up in the simple. The simple cells are reacting, saying, yes, there's a line of that orientation. Both cells in the simple cells. But in here, now, I have the yellow ones being activated, which means, oh, there's a horizontal line. Why are there two cells activated? Why are there two cells activated in that horizontal line? What's special about that horizontal line? It starts and stops. It starts and stops. Because it starts and stops, I have a start cell and an end cell. They're called hypercomplex cells. The start cell and end cell tell me the boundaries of that. Do I also have start and stop cells for the white neurons? Yes. I also have start and stop cells on a line of that horizontal for that. So far, so good? So, the dorsal stream. The dorsal stream goes to the parietal lobe. This information from my lines is going to go to the parietal lobe. The parietal lobe is going to say, one line is above the other line. Wait, yellow. Yep. One line's above the other line. So what am I going to perceive? Two lines. What if I disconnect this part of my parietal lobe? What would I see? One line. How do I know that those lines are not just one line? Because between those lines, who else is sending information to my parietal lobe? How do I know that there's a space between those two lines? Wait, is there a line between them? Is there a yellow line between the other two yellow lines? Do you see anything within here? No. So the parietal lobe is saying, here's a line, here's another line. There's no lines in between. Therefore, those are two separate lines. Ruby's not here because her eyeballs are not here, so I can't mess with Ruby's glasses. But when Ruby takes her glasses off, she can't tell the difference between two lines. Why not? The parietal lobe can't see the distance between the lines. So she sees one blurry line. Are you following this so far? I love your Polaroid picture. That is amazing. Okay, so because we're going to talk about color today, so it just makes me happy. Okay, so think about this with look at the word lines. How many cells are being activated by the word lines? Think if we break this apart into columns. How many different angles are there present? Let's just write a simple letter. How many angles are present? I got 2. What are the 2 angles represented? Does it change the way you see it now? It's a 6. I didn't mean to make it a 6. It just 6'd out a little bit. Let me fix that really quickly. Fill in that little dot. Get rid of that right here. Make some little creative. Okay, maybe do a little more. Let's just zoom as much as I can zoom in. That dot's really high up there. Let me fix that just a little bit more. Oh, no. Let me just move. No, I can't even move that. Okay, anyway. But when I zoom this in, does it hit different receptors in your eyeball? Yes. Now it's hitting lots of lines. I can't even look at small. Change the width of my line. Now it's hitting a whole series of lines all the way across. Is there a space between all these lines going across this letter I? Can you see gaps in between the lines in this letter I? There's no gaps. It's one giant bar. Make it a little bit thicker. I can try to make it all the way down through. Oh, there's a gap. I filled the gap. If I did this with all my handwriting, it would be perfect. Okay? So what happens when I zoom back out again? Whoa. There's my eye. Hello, eye. Hey, what happened to my little lines that I drew above my eye? Talking about the eye, drawing an eye. Eye. Okay. I'd make R's if it was higher though. It's good stuff, people. Come on. It's dad junior stuff. So now, where am I projecting this in my eyeball? Is it the same as projecting this in my eyeball? Activates the same cells. The difference is the amount of cells being activated. The difference is the amount of information being sent to the parietal lobe. You can actually see a spot now that I missed. Ah! Why can you see that spot that I missed? Yeah, in that particular column, it stops and starts in that one little tiny narrow area. This is how you see things. The parietal lobe tells you the characteristics of where it is in space, if there's any spaces or any gaps. Your visual cortex is literally analyzing the end. How come there's a whole bunch of different ends down here? each one of those lines stops at a slightly different place. So we perceive each one of those lines as having kind of a organic, drippy aspect to it. At least that's what I see. But if I go back and zoom it out all the way, now it's just an eye. And it doesn't really have that many ends to it. In fact, it's actually kind of blurry. It's kind of half there and half not there for some of your eyeballs. If you have glasses on, it's going to be even worse. Okay. So let's put this eye on the back of your eye. Okay, so what is the back of your eye made out of? Here's the back surface of your eye. What's the center of it called? Somebody say it. Who said it? What is the focus point of your eye called? Fovea. Fovea. You had the right word, but it's just my handwriting. Yeah. So fovea. In the fovea, I'm going to zoom in. Okay. Ooh, it looks like an atom. What is that? I'm going to draw these. These are called receptive fields. Can someone tell me what a receptive field is? Go. A receptive field is an area of neurons that respond to light. We call them photoreceptors. So a receptive field is an area. So in the fovea, what kind of area is accompanied by each of these receptive fields? Is it big or small? I'll give you an example out here. Let me make these in yellow. Here's what the receptive fields look like in the periphery of the eye. Those are the receptive fields. If light hits any one of those receptive fields, your brain says light. Everybody has experienced seeing stars in their life, I hope. Okay, what does it feel like when you see a star? Not like movie stars. But... Oh, come on. What color are they? White. Some people see them as silver. Really bright white. Really bright, shining light. So some people see stars that go like this. Sing! Sing! They just shoot off to the side. You're like, wait for it. We should have all lay in the sun and said, everybody stand up. That'd be fun. It's so nice out. Yeah, and then man down. Yeah, we'll see who's got enough blood sugar today. Because when you see stars, what's happening is you're actually firing the cells in the occipital lobe. And you're seeing individual cells firing. What would a point of light be? What is a single flash of light? That is just one receptive field being activated. Brace yourself. What if the light is big enough to shine on two receptive fields? You see a line. If the light shines on two receptive fields, you see a line. If I had a good glow-in-the-dark yo-yo in here, we could do this, but I don't. But if I take a light and spin the light around, I don't want to do this with my phone because I'm sure I'll fling it. What do you see if I spin the light around? A circle! How come you don't see just a point moving around? Your eyes aren't fast enough to see it, so as the light is shining on one receptive field, by the time that receptive field stops firing, where's the light? In the next receptive field. The light's moved, but your eye still sees the light. Because your eye still sees the light, you see a continuation, a line. So anytime I connect two, that is a line. You following this so far? Two receptive fields equals a line. What if I shine my letter I on here? How could I perceive the letter I? I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to make some receptive fields in here. I need to change my pen a little bit. Oops. Why are the receptive fields so small in the fovea? That's where you see the finest lines. If I send a little dot, a red dot, I shine my little red dot, and it's not shining. There it is. Whoa, that's a big red dot. If I shine my red dot there, you're going to see what? You're going to see a red light, right? If I take my red dot and make it significantly smaller and shine it there, you're going to see a flash of red. What if I shine my dot and it lands right here? You're going to see a little red line. Why are you going to see a red line? Two receptive fields. Okay, so this is really hard to understand on how it actually works in the eyeball, and I don't truly understand how it works in the eyeball, but the angle at which these two receptive fields are to each other tells me the angle of the line and which column to go to. So, if I take the same light and shine it over here at exactly the same relative angle between receptive fields, it goes to the same column. So like if I put the box on here, okay, let's go make the box. Whoa, big box. Here's my box. I'm showing you a tiny little box in the middle of your eye. I'm shining the light on it. You're looking at this box. It's hitting a series of receptive fields in the same 90-degree angle to each other. So that goes to one column. The other receptive fields line up and go to another column. Wait a second. Are those two at the same relative angle to each other? Yes. They're meant to be. So they go to the same column. How are they separated? What's in between them? White circles, which are non-activated photoreceptors. So there's light, followed by dark, followed by light. Therefore, we see two lines. What about the side? The perpendicular. Same thing. Photoreceptor, non-activated photoreceptor, activated photoreceptor. We see two lines going this way. So to understand this a little bit, let's look at the photoreceptors and then we'll go back to this little drawing. Because remember, if I zoom out enough, can you tell that there's a box in there, or does it just look like a yellow dot? Oh, you can still see the box. Yay! Depending on your visual acuity, whether you can see that little box in there or not. When I say visual acuity, I mean how well you focus on your fovea. Why do I need these old man glasses? I need to take the world and focus it on my fovea when I get close enough to the information. Like, I can't see the numbers on the page. Even out here, I can't see what the numbers are. And my arms are only so long. And if I put it down and try to back up, how come I can't see the numbers? The numbers are small enough that it's being sent to areas where I have receptive fields. Let me change this back to white. The receptive fields around my fovea, bless you, are very large. Because the areas around my receptors, around my fovea are larger, I can't see the difference between fine lines. Because the line could be here, 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 or here, and my brain sees one line. Is this making sense? It gets more, as you keep going, it starts making more sense. And the idea that you're actually seeing the way that the world is kind of a joke. Are you actually seeing the way the world really is? No. You're just deconstructing the world into a series of lines. Yeah. This should be chapter... we didn't do the development and plasticity chapter. You notice we kind of lost through that one. This should be chapter 5. Hey, Google. In Calit's Biological Psychology, what is the vision chapter?
This is the top result.
Oh, it just gave me open textbooks, cheap textbooks. Sage Publishing, chapter 2. No, that's Sage Publishing. Never mind. Is it chapter 5? For the 12th edition? Yeah. It used to be chapter 6. Now they moved to chapter 5. Chapter 4 is the plasticity brain development. Kind of skipped that due to being sick. Okay. Okay. So now, we kind of drew this diagram. We'll get back to that in a second. What's going on in between your eyeball and your brain? Let's zoom in. I'm just going to draw these relative to the drawings. Oops. Sorry. This is relative to the drawings. Ooh, looks like a dinosaur. Whoa. Okay. This is called a rod. Guess what this one's called? Whoa. I can draw cones better than I can draw rods, evidently. Okay. Rods and cones basically do the same thing. They have chemicals in them that respond to sunlight. Take neurobiology here, and you'll explain them. The rods are covered with these little discs, and the cones are covered with these little discs. I'm going to zoom a disc in so you can see it. Okay, that's what the discs look like. When light energy comes and hits the disc, my mouse tends to do weird things. When I send light to this little disc, it closes sodium channels. Okay, so this should be entertaining in here. We'll see if this works. So right now, what do we have? What's going on in our environment right now? There's light bouncing off the screen. Do we have lots of different lights bouncing off the screen? Okay, so what color is this? Gray, darker gray, black, blue. Can you see the edge of this, of the light here? Okay, so what if I turn this off? What happens? I can see your phone's blowing you off. But what happens? did I change the color of the screen? Did I change your perception of the screen? Yeah, so look up around inside the building now. What do you notice? Can you see the lights now? I can. I normally can't see the lights by looking up here. Because usually what do I see? The bright yellow light from the light makes it shines light onto all of my photoreceptors, wherever they are. It shines light onto all of the cells of my fovea, so therefore I can't see any lines. Now that the lights are turned off, I can see the lines. Because the way the photoreceptors work is when light hits them, they close sodium channels. So wait a second. If I close a sodium channel, what happens to a cell? Say it louder. No, you're right. You're so close. It stops sending electrical signals. I know. If I block sodium channels, I stop sending electrical signals. Because you need sodium channels in order to action potential. So in the dark, as you're sitting here in the dark, your eyeballs are adjusting. And so the relative brightness of this, when I first shut the lights off, was really, really bright, but how is it now? To me, it's really bright when I turn around and look at it, because I'm looking back this way. I try not to stand here, because when I stand there, I get the shine from the projector. I can see that shining on my eye. When the light shines on the projector, what happens to my vision? That blurry gets washed out. Has anybody ever done this, trying to see what color the light is when the sun's setting or sun's rising and you're stopped at a traffic light? How come you can't see the color of the traffic light? There's so much light you can't differentiate between the different densities of light, the different colors. That's why on most east-west facing streets, especially newer neighborhoods, they have these like weird flat lenses on the lights so you can actually see them. In the old days, they literally had little things that popped up and down. But anyway, so now watch what happens. When the lights come on, what does it feel like? What color does it influence? Yellow! Very strange. What happens to the brightness of the screen? It dims, but look at the yellow on the board now. Did you notice how yellow the board was before? No, how come it's changed? Because the lights above us are yellow, after sitting here for a few minutes, you don't see the yellow. Because your brain, well, your eyeballs adapt. I'm going to write this up here. What is the second messenger? Come on, what's the second messenger? ATP, ADP, AMP, phosphorylating G proteins, all that good stuff. That water's nasty. From the water fountain out there? I think our garden hose water tastes better than that water. Clearmaker College needs more water filling stations. Do they want to go march on campus and tell that we need more water filling stations to save the world? Or have water that doesn't taste like someone's? Never mind. Okay. Okay. Second messengers do lots of things. They're called metabotropic. They adapt. So if I shine a bright light on your eyes for a couple seconds, you can't see. Because it takes a couple seconds for the metabotropic second messengers to balance everything out. Okay, so this is really kind of neat. And I remember when I first started teaching here, We spent like 3 weeks trying to explain this. I'm going to use 6 minutes, and you just have to accept it. In the dark, what are your photoreceptors doing? They're firing. In the dark, the photoreceptors are firing. Do you see better in the dark? Oh, challenge accepted. I'm thinking of how I can black out this screen. Somebody in here has, like some of you have been in here in my intro class, and if you've been here at 8 o'clock in the morning, when I first open the door and you take 2 steps in, what happens? Oh yeah, you walk in, you're like, I got nothing. And the reason is because when you're out there, because just brace your eyeballs. Ooh, that was bright. Ow! You should try that. It's really painful. Why is it so painful? Low density light, right here. Density is the percentage of lumens per square inch, if you can. Okay? To very high density light, very high lumens per square inch. That's why I always am prepared. Why should you wear sunglasses? Protect your eyeballs. Especially living in Southern California, always wear sunglasses, especially if you're at the beach or anything. You sunburn your eyeballs. Yeah, people who wear glasses, it doesn't happen to you as much. But when you're out, if you're out without sunglasses and you aren't wearing anything, you can sunburn your eyeballs. And if you sunburn your eyeballs too many times, guess what happens as you get old? Macular degeneration. Which means the macula, which is this part right behind your eyeball that's shiny, that reflects light and turns red when you take pictures with old cameras. Red eye? Okay. Anyway, that starts peeling, like skin's peeling. Do you want your eyeball skin to peel inside? No, because guess who lives in that macula? No, your photoreceptors. You need those. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn this back on again. So now when you turn the light back on, it's more fun in the classroom when the lights actually flip as opposed to fade. Okay, so I just made an ambiance lighting. Okay. Did the screen turn orange? Why not? The light's low enough, so not the projector, that the light's not dense enough to reflect enough light off the screen to project into your eyeball. But if you look around at each other, you'll see that each other are very yellow. Okay? Especially Ashley up the corner. Epically yellow. Good job. Okay? And the reason is because she's sitting under the spotlight. So you guys are quite yellow right here as well. Okay, but again, so what's happening is that when I turn on the light, the cells stop. And then slowly start to fire again. That's why when I first open the door and it's super bright out there, what do I see? Nothing. Everything is completely washed out. And it takes a few minutes of blinking and your eyeballs adjusting for these photoreceptors to change the way that they're firing. So if they're always firing in the dark and you don't see in the dark, what do they have to be sending? What message do they send in the dark? What is that message? It's an inhibitory message. In the dark, your eyes are constantly firing and they release a chemical called glycine. Glycine reduces the neurons from firing. So in the dark, All the neurons are constantly firing and sending stop signals. Okay? When I turn on the light, what happens? They're not sending as many inhibitory signals as they were a minute ago. They're sending less inhibitory signals. How do I see the edge of this line? How do I see the edge of that line? Okay, let's go back to we talked about this a few minutes ago. Here's my receptive fields. Here's the edge of that line. How do I know where the edge is? Wait a second. So, if this is the line that I'm showing you, and then this is what I'm asking you to pay attention to, what is this receptive field doing right here? Is it in the light or the dark? Dark, because... Where's my line? There's my line. Darkness, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. Wherever there's light shining on the photoreceptors, those particular photoreceptors are being inhibited. Whenever there's darkness shown on them, they are firing. Wait a second. But when they're firing, they're inhibiting. You following this? Can I use you for an example? Cool. Okay. So you're going to walk that way. I'm going to hold you back. Okay? So, go for it. Okay, so I am a photoreceptor. Who's trying to walk forward? Okay, I'm going to let go. Ready? Keep walking. Good. What happens as soon as I stop my inhibition? Boom. Okay, good job. Why does he go forward? I stopped inhibiting him. Wow. Deep, man. So think about this. All of your cells in your eye are ready to go. They're always firing. All I have to do is stop inhibiting them. So this is why our eyeballs can actually catch a ball, or you can see a bug right before it hits you in the forehead. Because your eyes are constantly primed to see the difference between light and dark. Always firing, always ready, always watching Mike Kozowski. They're always ready to fire. And what matters, I'm going to draw the next part of this, and this is what becomes more complicated. You have another set of cells called bipolar cells. He is a bipolar cell. Bless you. Bipolar cells are very high spontaneous firing rate. What is a spontaneous firing rate? They want to always be firing. The bipolar cells have a very leaky system. They want to fire constantly. How come they don't? What's being sent here? What are the photoreceptors sending? In the dark, what are photoreceptors telling the bipolar cells to do? No, they're sending EPSP or IPSP. So they're telling the bipolar cells to stop firing. So when it's dark, stop firing. When it's dark, stop firing. It's dark, stop firing. It's dark, stop firing. As soon as a light hits it, it says, no, it stops stop firing. So immediately it goes forward. Laughing at or laughing with? I can't tell. Yeah, okay, no, laughing at. That's fine. I accept it. Now, Dr. Simmons, rhinoceroses don't know the difference between laughing at and laughing with. Old Far Side country. Now, the bipolar cells are always wanting to fire, but why aren't they always firing? The photoreceptors are constantly inhibiting them. So when I look at the edge of this board right here, can anybody see the grid that's behind this? Yeah, so the grid that's behind this, if I look on my computer screen, I can't see it. Wait, I bet I could if my reading glasses are on. Yep, I can with my reading glasses on. But on my computer screen, I can't see the grid. The reason I can't see the grid on my computer screen is because the space between each one of the little lines, when I get this close, I can't see it here either. There, I can see it. Each little space between each line has to be different enough to fire a different receptive field. And because my old people eyeballs, without my reading glasses, if I put my reading glasses on, I can see them. Not. There. Not. But if I can't line them up on receptive fields, I can't see where the light is and where the light isn't. It just doesn't exist until I can hit the individual receptive fields. Is this starting to make more sense? A little bit? Baby steps? I know it's a lot, but we have one more cell to add in. Okay, we have two more cells to add in, but that's not important. Okay, these are ganglion cells. So what's wrong with the red? Why is it harder to see? Because it's harder to see. Well, you can't define itself as a cell. I can make the red easier to see. How can I make the red easier to see by turning the lights off? So right now, the red light is shining on your eye. With the red light shining on your eye can see where the red lines are. But when I turn on, if I turn this on relatively low, it's not too bad, because the red light is still there. But if I turn this on full speed, what happens with the amount of contrast with the red and the black? The contrast isn't as great. You can still see the white just fine. But the red gets lost because, remember, density. Density of light, luminosity. Not the little game where you chase butterflies around. That's different. Okay, so I'm going to switch this back down again a little bit. And so now I'm going to write this in a better, what is the highest contrast that works on the screen? Yellow. Whoa, that's a weird F. The ganglion cells lead to the optic nerve. Ganglion cells record information from these words, bipolar cells. The ganglion cells send information to the bipolar cells. But the ganglion cells getting information from the bipolar cells, whenever the bipolar cells are firing, your optic nerve is firing. With the optic nerve firing, you see things. So far, so good? I know, it's a lot of double negatives. How do you see? Well, you stop inhibiting a bipolar cell. Why do you think we stop inhibiting in order to fire? Why not just start action potentials when you see light? That's the way it is, but you can't just use that as an argument. Think about your car, okay? Your wonderful little vehicle that you drive around and slowly ruin the planet, okay? Unless it's a bicycle. Yeah. Anyway, so what's the most complicated part of your car? The engine, right? Why does it? And what's the simplest thing in your car? They really haven't changed since they were invented. The brakes. How do brakes work? You push on them, the caliper pushes on the wheel, and it rubs on the wheel. Hopefully it's not rubbing on other parts, but you know. Bicycles, the same way. You squeeze a lever which pulls a cable and squeezes metal parts against your bicycle rim. Or we have disc brakes on my mountain bike, and you squeeze the hydraulic fluid and it squeezes the calipers. It's very simple. There's like two moving parts. Brakes are easy. But making things go requires significant amount of energy. So that's why your brain, your eyeballs specifically, are always in go mode. And all you have to do is apply the brakes, and you see. Your eyeballs use a tremendous amount of energy. Has anybody ever been like trying to read for a long period of time? What happens with your eyes? You have a hard time seeing. You have a hard time focusing. You have to just kind of close your eyes and let your eyeballs relax. What would happen if we put you in a 100% pure light environment? It's actually called snow blindness. This actually happens, is that, has anybody ever been in a snowstorm in here? What's it like? You can't see anything. We've got stuck in a snowstorm while we were driving up to the mountains once. You just basically slow down to a crawl or even stop and put your hazards on and hope the person behind you is doing the same thing. Because the wind blowing the snow and the light shining on it, everything is white. And everything is if you don't have a car around you, what's the only thing that you can see? Your hand in front of your face. Everything else has no contrast. Everything is activated. So what happens is someone who gets stuck out in the snow like that, up on a glacier specifically where this used to happen, people actually go blind. Because without any contrast, their eyeballs just all stop firing. And if they stop firing too long, the cells die. There's another thing called cave blindness. You can kind of gather where this is coming from. So what if you're stuck in a cave underneath the ground for too long without any lights? You can go blind because there's no photoreceptors being activated. It used to happen to coal miners a long time ago. They got trapped underground for a couple of days. They would come out and their vision would be permanently affected. Now most miners have not battery, but little rechargeable lights that they can have with them. And you should all have one of these at your house. You can get them, they're little flashlights, and you just crank the little capacitor and it winds them up. So as long as you have enough fuel to turn the crank, you can have light. Is that important for your eyeballs? Yeah. The light, yeah. No, because close your eyes and look. Can you tell when you're facing the screen, not facing the screen? Yeah, light goes right through your eyeballs pretty well. Yeah. When you look at the sun, you can tell where the sun is. You can tell where things are, even if you can't actually see. You will, because when you close your eyes, there's no light shining through. I would be closing my eyes and crying a lot, but that's, for me, stuck in a cave. Especially if you're a soccer team and the water's slowly coming up. hey, I have an idea. Let's take a class trip to a bunch of caves that typically flood in the wintertime. Is it going to rain today? Yeah, don't worry about it. Wait, what happened? You know how they got them out? Anybody hear the story? The kids in the field in Thailand? They anesthetized them. The divers had to snake through these little caves to get them out, so they anesthetized the kids and then swam them really quickly through and then revived them on the other side. Because the kids couldn't get the kids through the tunnels that they had to go through underwater in fast enough time that the kids wouldn't aspirate water. So they anesthetized the kids, put them to sleep. Like surgery, putting to sleep, and then kind of killed them a little bit on the way through and then revived them on the other side. Well, that's one of my friends is a lifeguard, and sometimes when someone's panicking and drowning, if they're too big, you kind of let them drown just a little bit so they stop fighting so much, and then you bring them back. Because otherwise you can't save them, because they're beating you up as they're trying to bring you in. Anyway, so now, there's just one more cell there's actually two, but only going to talk about one. There's one more cell though that's important. Okay, I have to zoom in a little bit, and I'll try to remember to post this on here. There's cells called horizontal cells. Sorry, the contrast ratio is not good enough to see that at this distance. Okay, so let me fix that. Why do you think they're called horizontal cells? They don't respond to horizontal light. They go between the rods and the cones. They go horizontally. Your GoPro folks, just pass the time to go set up for these. Careful. I don't want you to rush and hurt yourself. Okay. So these horizontal cells go laterally between the rods and cones. They go laterally between the rods and cones. And what they do is very simple. Back. What they do is very simple. They inhibit. Okay? So I will give you a very simple answer to this, which makes it a lot easier to understand. What's the difference between one receptive field and another receptive field? The answer is horizontal cells. So where do we find these horizontal cells? In the gaps right here between the receptive fields. So if I shine a light right here, what does the horizontal cell do to the receptive field next to it? Deactivates it. Deactivates it. So when I ask you, how do you see the difference between two lines? What's in between these two lines? Horizontal cells that are deactivating the receptive fields in between the two. So we have activated receptive field. The activated receptive field looks to the one to this side and says, deactivate. So it looks at this one and says, deactivate. So does that line stand out if I'm deactivating either side? Have you ever seen that where you have a line of soldiers standing forward? Okay, whoever wants to volunteer to go blow themselves up, step forward. Everybody else steps back one. The one guy's like, oh. Okay, good job. Okay, but, so when I have a line shining on my receptive field, wherever the receptive fields are active, they are sending ganglion cells to the brain, but are also sending inhibitory signals to the side. Let me show you what this looks like. I'm going to stop the recording because I don't want to get copyrighted.